everyone, it's Jo. I'm the Kosher Ninja, and we've been chatting about my adventure last year hiking on the Shvil Israel, or Israel National Trail. If you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad you've stopped by. While you're here, go check out my videos from the Shvil, and don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell to get notified when I post new videos. Right now though, we're going to talk about water on the Shvil. I actually was going to do this as one video because it's really just one topic, but it started to get into this monstrous long video again. So I decided for your sakes, and because it is an important topic, I decided to break it into two. After all, water is the single most important thing you need to plan for and respect on the Shvil, because it's life-giving, but the flip side is that it can also kill you, and in more ways than one. We've already talked about the importance of planning and training to make sure that your Shvil adventure is enjoyable, and we've also talked about the climate. And there's a complex relationship between all of these factors and your need for water. You'll need to manage your water supply to make sure that you have enough, but not too much. And you'll need to keep water top of mind so that, again, you remember to drink enough and not too much. And not to mention that you also need to make sure you don't get washed away in a flash flood. That's a lot. So today we're going to talk about water needs, and next time we'll talk about how to strategize to meet those needs. But first, let's just talk about water. Good old H2O. If we've been through second grade, then we'll know that roughly 60% of our bodies is made up of water, and without it we can't survive for more than a few days, even at the best of times. It's critically important for the proper functioning of almost every physiological process that you can think of. As far as the Shvil is concerned, only a few of these most important processes are: it helps with your brain function. In other words, it helps you think straight so you don't get lost. It facilitates your metabolism and delivery of nutrients, as well as the processing of waste. So it keeps you strong and healthy, in other words. And it helps regulate body temperature, so think sweat. And it helps with your joints. It helps your joints function properly. So that's really important, obviously, for getting from point A to point B. In addition to being essential, we all know from experience that water is heavy. Did you know that 1 liter of water weighs 1 kilo? For you Americans, that's just over a quart and a bit of water weighs 2.2 pounds. Honestly, why can't you go metric? So much more logical. So here's some good news. Just like not enough water is dangerous, too much water is also dangerous. It can set your electrolytes out of balance, which can also cause brain dysfunction and other symptoms, and can also lead to death in extreme cases from water intoxication. You might actually have heard of the case of a woman not so long ago in California who died after drinking 8 liters of water in a drinking challenge competition of some sort, sponsored by a local radio station. You're thinking, well, that's ridiculous. I could never carry enough water for that to happen on the Shvil. Well, actually, you can. It doesn't really take that much water, and most cases of water intoxication or hyponatremia happen to soldiers in training and endurance athletes like marathon runners or triathletes who aren't exactly sitting in a hot parking lot just chugging water. In fact, different studies have determined that anywhere from 13% to 1/3 of endurance athletes experience some level of hyponatremia during competition. Now, this is important because doing a thru-hike has been compared to endurance sport, and that's especially the case in the climactic conditions of the Shvil. Your kidneys can only process up to a maximum of about 1 liter of water per hour, and it's estimated that during an intense endurance sport event, this amount can be as little as 1/10 of that amount, due to something called vasopressin levels, which are a hormone that cause the kidneys to conserve water. As a result, certainly drinking more than 1 liter an hour is not recommended. And if your vasopressin has kicked into high gear like it can on the Shvil, maybe not quite to that intense effect, but still, even less than 1 liter might be dangerous. In fact, I think one of my Israeli hiking buddies, I'll talk about later, was probably not far from this danger zone. On the Shvil, you'll be constantly reminded to drink enough water, and that's a good thing. But no one's going to tell you not to drink too much. So how do you know how much to drink, or if you're drinking enough or too much? Well, basically, you should match your intake with your output, so what you've lost through sweat and urine. You may have heard the common advice not to wait until you're thirsty, because by then it's too late. Well, that may be fine advice, and it is actually great advice for ordinary circumstances, but in the conditions on the Shvil, this could actually be dangerous. From what I've read, the recommendation in these circumstances actually is to drink to your thirst. Now, that doesn't mean you wait until your throat is parched and you're gasping for water, water. No, you've got to listen to your body, and if you feel like a drink would be nice, take that drink. But also, don't leave it to chance. Make sure you have a system in place so you don't forget. For my part, I was worried by the constant warnings to drink enough, so I eventually devised a strategy that I think worked pretty well, and I called it my drinking game strategy. So basically, every time I either saw water or thought of or heard a hiker buddy say a word related to water intake or output, so I'm thirsty or sweat or I have to pee or there's a spring up ahead or I wish it would rain, then I'd take a sip or even a gulp. It gave me the security that I was doing something to make sure I was drinking enough. But because I often forgot or didn't notice the cue, I really wasn't in any danger of drinking too much. And there were actually points where my body just said, no more. So I listened. So heed the warnings to drink enough water, but also make sure you listen to your body and don't drink too much. Another important thing is, because of those electrolytes that too much water messes with, is you need to carry electrolytes as well, which we're going to talk about more next time. The Red Book has a recommended water requirement for each daily segment, and these can be as low as 3 to 5 liters on a couple of days, but generally they're about 4 to 5 liters, and on some days can be as much as 5 to 6 liters. And there's actually one segment where it's 6 to 7 liters is recommended if it's a hot day. So anywhere from 3 to 7 kilos of water. And when you need to carry it all on your back, it's worth taking a closer look. First of all, everyone's water needs will be different. Sure, they depend on objective environmental factors, so things like the weather and the terrain on a particular segment, but they also depend on personal factors, so things like your size, your metabolism, your fitness level, and the kind of food that you carry. Second, the daily recommendation in the Red Book includes not just your drinking water, but also water for other things like cooking and hygiene. In my opinion, these two categories of water needs really should be treated separately, and I'll explain some more about that next time. We've talked about the Israeli climate, and this will be a huge factor in how much water you'll need. In the fall, you'll be starting in the north, and it'll be hot and humid with little to no shade. And you Israelis will be used to the conditions, but the few forests along the way are not going to provide the kind of relief that we foreigners will be looking for. Fortunately though, if you are going southbound, you will have learned to figure out and estimate your water needs by the time you get to the desert. So that's a bonus. If you're starting in the spring, on the other hand, you'll have to account for the fact that you're starting in the desert. And the days will be hot and the nights cold. And even during the relatively shorter and less hot early days, the dry desert air is just going to suck the moisture right out of you. Plus, the stakes will be higher because of the conditions in the desert. So you're going to have a much steeper and faster learning curve. It's going to be that much more important for you to know your body and your water needs going into it, and to listen to your body carefully from day one. And don't forget that later on you're still going to have to deal with the heat and humidity once you get up north. So someone like me, I'm little, I'm pretty fit, and I eat very little salt in my diet. It took me a while to realize that I really didn't need anywhere near the recommended amounts of water. Not for drinking, especially in the north, where there was access to water, and not for other purposes. I didn't bring my stove, so I didn't need much water for cooking or cleaning dishes. And because I stayed with trail angels or in hostels at strategic locations up north, especially, and because I carried an entirely unnecessary change of clothes, I also didn't need a whole lot of water for laundry. Of course, there was the time that I had to wash my socks after they were stolen by the fox. Fortunately, that night I was staying at a very well-equipped campground that had running water. The problem is, even when I realized that I didn't need so much water, I never really assimilated that lesson fully. I mentioned that in Israel, it's constantly drummed into you to make sure that you have enough water, and rightly so. But as a result, I was so terrified of not having enough water that most of the time I ended up carrying up to twice as much water as I really needed, or maybe even more. A word of caution here. Do not take this as advice not to take your water needs seriously. Take it as advice to be strategic, and we'll talk about that more next time. On the other hand, you can end up like the Israeli guy that I ran into, who he had set out that morning with almost 6 liters of water on a 4 to 5 liter day. And by the time I met him, just after midday, he was almost down to his emergency supply. And we couldn't find the water refill point, and he wouldn't accept my water because we're gonna find water soon and you need yours. Well, I didn't push it because, well, to be honest, I was actually afraid that my water would run out as well, because my supply was from the previous evening. And I was scared I would run out, but it turns out that I actually had more than enough to share. I just didn't know how much I had, which was another big mistake that we'll talk about in water strategy next time. In the end, we didn't find the water soon, and he finally had to accept my water. Now, my buddy was a good bit bigger than me, and no doubt he needed more water, but like I said earlier, I still think that he was drinking way too much. There's a good chance that instead of actually being dehydrated, he was actually on the verge of messing with his electrolytes. And I don't know if he ever figured that out. The other problem with drinking too much is that you end up wasting it all. And just to make the point, next time I'll tell you what happened when I tried to camel up. In the end, what it means is that if you drink too much, you'll end up carrying too much, but still running out when you need it most. So even though I had lots left and my Israeli buddy ran out, we were both actually carrying too much. And because every liter adds 1 kilo to your pack, carrying more than you need is a serious problem, whether you're little or big. When you multiply it by the climate, every additional liter is causing you to actually need more because of the extra exertion, or maybe it's causing you to need less because of the vasopressin effect. Either way, it's a wasted effort. And unlike on the other major trails where the weather is more moderate and you can get away with carrying a liter or a little more and then just replenish by filtering water along the way, this is not an option on the Shvil. You have to carry a lot, and you have to carry it all. So next time we'll talk about how to do that efficiently. So to recap, water needs are highly individual. At the same time, drinking too little is dangerous, but drinking too much is just as dangerous. Listen to your body, but have a strategy in place so you don't forget to drink. Especially if you're not an Israeli and you're not experienced with the climate, you're going to need to start out cautiously and by taking more than you think you're going to need. And as you go, you're quickly going to learn to figure out how much you actually need. So, are you planning for the Shvil or for another trail? Did this video help you understand the importance of water and knowing your own body and your water needs? Do you still have other questions? Leave those for me in the comments section down below. And if you've liked this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and share with your friends. If you've hiked the Shvil Israel and you have anything helpful to add, please put that in the comments down below, and I'd just love to hear from you. I'm so excited that we get to share our journeys in this way, and I can't wait to see you again next time. Until then, thanks for watching, and shalom, eh?